Candy with Eyes to Jesus.blogspot.com. And I know it's actually May, but last month, April, of course, was Autism Awareness Month, and I do like to put out some Asperger's, high-functioning autism type videos out in April. And it doesn't always have to be every April. It could also just be when I feel like it. But I did want to do at least one video on Asperger's because it has been a while, and I was wanting to do this video in April. However, when I finally had the time to do a video, I got a cold. Now, the cold only lasted 2 days, but it did leave a bit of a lingering cough, which made talking for long periods of time a bit annoying. And I noticed that, of course, in homeschooling, because after I talked for a while, I'd have to clear my throat. But I am much more clearer now, not coughing nearly as much, so let's hammer this out. Today, I predominantly wanted to talk about Asperger's and brain function, and I just have some notes that I wrote down because there's definitely some aspects and some points that I don't want to forget to touch upon in today's video. Now, there are some physical, oh, by the way, I'm using the word Asperger's. However, the official word now or phrase is autism spectrum disorder. Under that terminology, I would be level 1 or high functioning. I am fully able to be self-sufficient even though I am autistic. And my ability of being able to be fully self-sufficient is largely due to that I am an INTJ personality type, and we are systems builders, and I have naturally developed systems for working with some of my challenges and powering through or workarounds, etc. So I'm able to be fully self-sufficient. But anyways, throughout this video, I'm probably just going to use the word Asperger's, or in referring to someone who has Asperger's, I might refer to that person as an Aspie or as an Aspergian. And I am a female with Asperger's, and female Asperger's or high-functioning autism does present a bit differently than males with Asperger's. For example, that show that I've heard a lot of people talk about on Netflix, Atypical, the young man portraying Asperger's or high-functioning autism, he fits very well with males with Asperger's that I have seen. And while I relate and totally understand what he's going through, as a female, while I relate and understand and feel a lot of the same things, I do present differently. And this is why females are so much under the radar when it comes to Asperger's. I did not learn I have Asperger's until I was 30 years old. That is 30 years of my life wondering, maybe 28, I started wondering at age 2, as far as I can remember, why people seemed to know certain things that I didn't know, how everybody seemed like everybody was in some club that I wasn't a member of, why I seemed so different. So 28 to 30 years of wondering that, finally at age 30, I found out, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I just have a different brain type. I have Asperger's. I am neurodiverse. And, I'm 11 years in knowing that now. I'm 41 years old now. But so yeah, I will be referring to this as Asperger's, but this includes level 1 autism and autism spectrum disorder. So there are some physical aspects of Asperger's, typically such as digestion issues, sensory processing problems, etc. But those digestion issues and sensory processing are probably the two main physical aspects that you'll see the most often, of which I do have both. Often when the digestion issues are brought under control, then some of the anxiety that Aspergians suffer can diminish, and the person may find that they have a higher threshold for handling sensory stimuli than they did otherwise. The taking of certain supplements can sometimes boost these positive effects a bit more, such as in my experience, B vitamins and cod liver oil. And you will find that Aspergians are usually always somewhat deficient in B vitamins. I think it's because the way we have to process and go through life, I think we deplete and go through our B vitamins more than a neurotypical. So you can check if you have cracked heels, if you have cracked tongue, you're probably a bit deficient on vitamin B. Now, however, these things, changing your diet, for example, finding out what foods you are sensitive to and changing your diet to eat in a way that you feel better. And there's diets out there. For example, there's the GAPS diet. I felt very sick and felt worse on the GAPS diet, but that doesn't mean the GAPS diet doesn't work. That just means my requirements for my body is different than other people's requirements. You're going to have certain foods and things that you are sensitive to. Some of the main things that they have eaten on GAPS diet happens to be what I am sensitive to. And so that was a no-go for me. But I do know people who are very successful on that. So I don't adhere to any specific protocol or a diet, but I do adhere to paying attention to my body. Finding what foods and drinks make me feel better, what's neutral, what noticeably seems to have an effect. Like I have noticed carbonated things. Now that could be a pop, of course, or that could be a bubbly champagne or something. I can tolerate some carbonation, but not a whole lot. Otherwise, I actually get painful intestines. Just things like that. Notice what goes into your body and what effect it has on you. What you can eat that helps you feel better. I feel amazing eating avocados. But bone broths, I can only have those. I can only have those a bit. They actually kind of make me feel kind of blah. So you need to determine what makes you feel better and what you need to do without. And something that is messing up your digestive system is also going to affect anxiety and sensory processing. There is a gut-brain connection in that respect. So while diet and certain supplements can help with handling anxiety, having less of it, and maybe giving you a bigger threshold for processing sensory, it does not seem to help in social ability and socializing. And aren't those the biggest issues that we have as Aspergians? Aspergians often feel disconnected from most of the rest of humanity, with only a few people, if any, that they connect to at all. And this is not for lack of trying. We try to connect with people, but the results of our efforts are usually not very pleasing. Females will try to connect by masking. Either will zoom in on a certain individual or individuals or in movies or characters, and we try to imitate them. And that's part of the way that females end up flying under the radar, because male Aspergians don't mask as much. And frankly, I think I'm pretty bad at masking. In many ways, I present more male Aspergian because I'm not a very good masker. But I do definitely mask to an extent so that I can at least appear somewhat typical to the world around me. So there's that. Now, we Aspergians consider conversation to be, you speak, and then you be quiet. That person speaks. Now they're quiet. I'm speaking again. You're being quiet. And I personally, myself, I view conversation as information exchange. So I am giving you information. Now I'm going to be quiet. Now I'm listening for you to give information or feedback on that information back to me. And that is communication for me. Communication is information exchange. So we Aspergians are usually completely ignorant of the existence of unspoken communication. Now when I say unspoken communication, I'm using that synonymously with verbal communication. And what I mean there is either speaking verbally via sign language or the written word. All right? Now we can learn some unspoken communication, but it never comes to us naturally. And every part of unspoken communication that we learn it because it has to be pointed out and explained to us. Then we study it, and then we learn to copy it. So our nonverbal social communication is largely lacking, if not completely non-existent. So any non-verbal communication that you are receiving from an Aspergian, either one is in your imagination, we're not actually communicating what you're picking up non-verbally, or two, it is something that we have learned and memorized over the years. And that is a problem, by the way. A lot of times people will pick up nonverbal communications from Aspergians that we're not actually communicating. It is, I guess you could say, a misunderstanding. We will often say things that other people consider rude, too blunt, or highly inappropriate. If we are saying it, then that means we don't know that that's improper to say. So like with learning and memorizing unspoken communication, we also eventually learn what's appropriate to say and what isn't. And we learn this by trial and error. We learn this by saying the thing, and don't think we're reading people's reactions and figuring out it's inappropriate from that. Often we're not. We might say something that offends someone. We have no idea it offends that person. We continue speaking on it. They are putting out all these nonverbal communications, warning signals, their facial expressions, they're changing the tone of their voice, the way they use their eyes, their body language. We're not picking up on any of that. They're being quiet. So we think, oh, we're speaking information now. And then when we're done speaking information, we'll be quiet, and then they'll speak information to us. And little do we know, they're sitting over there getting madder and madder by the second, and we're completely oblivious to it. So when I say we learn about trial and error, what's appropriate to say and what's not, it's usually because some observant, polite, caring person will tell us that it was inappropriate. And if you're going to tell us it's inappropriate, we need to know why it's inappropriate. We need as much data on that as possible so that we can then memorize that that's inappropriate, memorize why that's inappropriate, and the more data we have about it, the more we can now take that memorized piece of information and bring it to other aspects of communication and go, oh, this might be inappropriate too because of this. All right, so it's good to have a social buffer. That's what I call it, a social buffer. A friend or a family member, or in my case, my husband, someone that when you are socializing, they're not going to point out your inappropriateness in the middle of the conversation and make you uncomfortable, and they're not going to get embarrassed by you either. They're going to be with you. They're going to support you. But afterwards, they're going to pull you to the side and let you know, just wanted to let you know that you said such and such, and that was inappropriate because of this, 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 and this. And this person was reacting to it in these ways. So now you know to look for that. A simple example is my husband taught me years ago that if I'm talking to someone and they like stand up, maybe they stand up to stretch, but then they don't sit back down, they stay standing up, that could very well be a cue that they're politely trying to tell me to shut up and they would like to leave the conversation. I had no clue about that before my husband alerted me to that. I would just continue talking. I would just assume, oh, they're tired of sitting. I get tired of sitting too. Maybe I'll stand up too and join them, and I'll just keep on talking. And then, another example, though, was one time, and this was just in recent years, this one woman, and this was when my children were younger and played with toys, and she had just gone through her children's toys, and she thought that maybe my children could use some more toys. So we purposely like secondhand and old cars, and we live on the cheap on purpose, but it can be assumed that we're poor because of it. And so she offered to bring me over all of her children's toys that she was getting rid of. And I said, oh, no thank you, I don't need them. I actually just went through my children's toys and are donating them to Goodwill. And I said, maybe you should just donate yours to Goodwill too. And she never spoke to me again and would actually avoid me. And my husband pointed out, because he was there watching the whole thing, he's like, you should have gone ahead and accepted it, and then you could have just quietly given those away to Goodwill with yours, because she was really trying to do a good deed for you. She thinks that we're poor and in need, and it would make her feel better to give us those toys. Now, what would I then, in the next situation similar to that, decide, okay, I'm going to take this burden that I don't need so that this other person feels better? I personally decided no. So I told my husband, that is interesting. I'm so glad you let me know. But if we had the same situation again, the same scenario again, knowing now what I know in that situation, would I have reacted differently? No. I would have chosen to no. Why do I want to take your kids' old toys and I'm trying to get rid of my kids' old toys? Give them the goodwill. That's what I'm going to do. So just because we learn something that may be appropriate or inappropriate, or we learn ways where we could have said something differently to make someone feel better instead of worse, doesn't mean we have to follow it. We shouldn't be walking around on glass being afraid of hurting people's feelings. Now, a lot of what's going to come into that, though, is our personality type. See, autism does not define me. I do not live autism. You have your personality that you are born with. And I was born with the personality INTJ. And then you have character. Character is the part of you that develops as you learn and grow through your life experiences. So the nature versus nurture argument, solved. We are given our personalities by nature. We are born with our personalities. But our character is via nurture. And then Aspergers, my autism, that is not my personality, nor is that my character. That is just traits. Those are certain traits that sometimes will show themselves, but they're still exercised through the filter of my personality and my character. So I thought of that the other day, and I really can't think of a clearer distinction than that. But because of your character and your personality, you may make different decisions. Maybe you would have decided, oh, I would have went ahead and taken the toys because it warms my heart to make someone else feel happy. Well, good for you. I don't have extroverted feeling. I have introverted feeling, and I don't really care. Again, I am bluntly honest, and that is an aspect of my Asperger's, a trait of my Asperger's that actually dances nicely with the INTJ personality type. So I use my Christian character to temper it. And I gather my Christian character from taking the Bible literally at what it says. And I interpret loving someone as not fooling them with fake flatteries, but with telling them the truth straight out. And since I'm an INTJ, I value efficiency, so I'm not going to dance around and make it flowery. I'm just going to say it. Get it out of the way. And that is how I express love. So, but I have said many inappropriate things throughout my life. And I look back at some of those times, and yes, my first reaction is embarrassment and disappointment in myself. But then I remember there was nothing I could have done. I said those things because I thought they were okay to say. I did not know that they were inappropriate. Now I do. So if I'm saying something and you think that it's inappropriate, it's either one, I honestly have no clue it's inappropriate, or two, I know it's inappropriate, but it needs to be said. So with me personally, you would have to then determine, well, wait, is she stating a fact? If so, it's probably that I don't care if it's appropriate or not. All right, but yeah, so that's just some of the aspects with unspoken communication or saying inappropriate things. And because we Aspies must learn, memorize, and mimic what's appropriate to say or not, and the same goes with unspoken communication, we will continue to make social faux pas our whole life. However, the older we get, the less mistakes or social faux pas we will make, and that's simply because we have memorized more through our life experiences and through social buffers and caring people pointing these things out to us. We have learned more how to read some unspoken cues and etc. I'm still fairly blind to a lot of the unspoken cues. For example, the other day we were at a party and I went up to someone and spoke with them. Now, I rarely ever go up to someone to speak to them because I usually don't get favorable results, and that's probably because as an INTJ, I abhor small talk. And as an Aspergian, small talk is not natural to me at all. So when I go up and talk to someone, I start in the middle of the conversation, you can say. I just get right to the point. Now, this friend knows that that's how I am. We've been friends for years. She's an INFP. But I went up and I was speaking to her, and I kid you not, I was in the middle of my third sentence when she just walked away, not acknowledging me at all. And I was finishing my third sentence to the open air. There was nobody there. So what happened? Well, INFP is right-brained. I'm INTJ, which is left-brained. And you're going to have different organization skills and different focusing skills between left-brained and right-brained dominance. She obviously was focused elsewhere on something else and apparently had no idea I was speaking to her. My being an Aspergian, I had no idea that she wasn't listening or that she didn't know I was talking to her. My reasoning or logic was we were standing about 2.5 feet away facing each other and I was speaking. Now, I would say I was speaking while looking at her, but I probably was not looking at her because I don't do very much eye contact and I don't look at people very often. Looking at a camera, I can do that. That's a camera. That's not an eye. There is no consciousness there. But yeah, that's a thing. A lot of people think that Aspergians could be shifty or that they're liars or that they're not trustworthy. And they tend to think that often because we don't make proper eye contact. And if we try to force eye contact and try to make that eye contact, in my personal experience, the person thinks then that I am flirting with them. And to me, that's way more horrifying and embarrassing than not making eye contact at all. Now, sometimes if this person is speaking something and I'm really, really, really into it, then I make eye contact. But my form of eye contact, when I'm really into what they're saying, usually turns into what looks like staring. And frankly, I don't know the difference between staring at someone's eyes and looking in their eyes. And I can't tell when someone is looking at me, nor can I tell when someone's looking in my eyes. Most of the time, if someone's speaking, if I'm looking at them at all, I'm looking at their mouth because that's where the sounds are coming from. But yeah, when I'm speaking to someone else, especially if I'm thinking, I very often am looking over their shoulder and I'm not actually looking at anything with my eyes. There's no focus here because I'm focusing in my mind. And for Aspergians, eye contact is very uncomfortable. In fact, it can be downright painful. And I think it's because it's a sensory thing. There's a lot of, for lack of a better word, data, or there's something there in a person's eyes. And it is too loud for us and extremely uncomfortable. But yeah, so diet, exercise, supplementation, that can help reduce some Aspergian anxiety. It can give us more of a threshold for handling stimuli. We can handle it maybe longer than we could normally, but it will never rid us of those issues. They can just maybe help us have more of a threshold of withstanding longer. The biggest help for anxiety, specifically for me, is being a Christian. You know, when I was a child, I didn't have as much anxiety or worries because I trusted my parents. They'll make everything better. They'll make everything okay. They love me and they're here to take care of me. But then as an adult, it was a little alarming. Mom and Dad can't be taking care of me now. I'm an adult. So what do? I have these anxieties and these worries. I became a Christian, and the Word of God says to give your worries and anxieties to God. And Proverbs chapter 3 says to trust in God and to wait on Him, and that parallels perfectly with Psalm chapter 37. Now, as for sensory, why do we have sensory issues? Well, it's because Aspergians have inhibited habituation. All right, this means that sensory data that fades into the background for neurotypicals does not fade away so much for us on the autism spectrum. For example, I am constantly aware of the lights coming in my windows, from the overhead light being on, from the lamps off to the side. I'm constantly aware of when the heater or the air conditioner is running, which neither is running right now. We're having kind of a chilly-ish day, so we're saving money, not having to run AC or heat. I am sensitive to certain sounds. I am sensitive to certain lights. And I have a superpower of super mega good smell. For example, we were driving in the car the other day with the windows down, and I could smell as we passed the neighborhood that someone had a dog outside who was suffering from parvo. Because I could smell the blood, and I know what that smells like because I've had a dog who went through parvo. I can smell if someone has been into my house that is not a family member. I can smell where they walked. I could follow the trail. That sounds really weird. But I'm also sensitive to textures. I like meat. I like the taste of it, but meat texture can sometimes make me vomit because every once in a while I get a little piece of bone or a little piece of gristle and I can lose it. So I am not big on eating meat. I like the taste. The texture is gaggy. But I do make myself eat meat from time to time because the protein really does make me feel better. But also, of course, I'm sensitive to touch, textures and touch as well. I do not habituate to my clothing. I am constantly feeling my head covering, my dress, my undergarments. I am constantly feeling and aware of my wedding ring and my watch. So I don't habituate to those. Constantly aware of them all the time. And that's also why a lot of us Aspergians, and a lot of neurotypicals too, we rip off or cut off those darn garment tags because it's itchy and scratchy and it doesn't stop itching or scratching. So it's important that we find clothing that, since we don't habituate to it or we habituate to it in only a limited way, that we can put up with feeling all day, non-stop. And the less comfortable clothing is, or harder it is to just feel it all day, the more you'll see me tugging at my garments. And embarrassingly, the thing I tug at the most is my undies. And that's because a waistband, I constantly feel it there and it constantly feels weird. I never get used to it. So that's what I tug at the most. That's actually the most uncomfortable thing of my whole ensemble. But you also see me, sometimes I'll be pulling out my sleeves. I hate being touched on my neck, so I will wear lower necklines. And if I have the higher necklines, I am pulling it down constantly, like many times a day. So with inhibited habituation, that means Aspergians have a brain that has extra activity. We have extra processing going on all the time because we're constantly aware of the lights. We're constantly aware of the clothing we're wearing. We're constantly aware of all the sensory around us. It's not fading into the background as much. Now, sometimes maybe some sensory can fade into the background to an extent. I'm still studying that, but I can tell you my habituation, if I have any, is very, very, very low. So that would be another reason. I mean, we have such active brains constantly processing the sensory data because it's not habituating, it's not fading into the background. And then add on top of that, you want us to live our daily life and socialize on top of that. I can tell you, as I've observed neurotypicals and compared them to me and have even interviewed a whole bunch, that wow, life is actually much easier for a neurotypical. Everyday life, doing everyday things, it's very, very, very challenging. I thought these things were challenging for everybody. No, it's easy for them. And that astounds me, by the way. That's amazing. So let's go more physically into the brain of an Aspergian. All right, and for this, we're going to go into the social stuff again, okay? So how come diet, supplementation, and exercise can help with anxiety, digestive issues, widening the threshold and sensory processing, but they don't seem to help with socializing, the bane of the Aspergian, the thing that probably bugs most of us the most. All right, well, we can have the perfect diet and the perfect supplementation, be getting the right amount of exercise, and we still are not picking up on sarcasm. We're still not connecting with other human beings. We still feel like outsiders. We still feel like everybody has a manual or they're having secret meetings and we are not privy to any of it. And how do we get the darn manual? How do we get into those stupid meetings? How does everybody know all the stuff that we don't know? Welcome to the Aspie world. So perhaps brain science has some answers. Now, it's theorized that Aspergians have less mirror neuron activity in their premotor cortex and the parietal cortex of the brain. And this has been somewhat observed with some testing, but it's not completely verified. But I think it's fairly likely accurate or close to accurate. These are areas in the brain that help neurotypicals understand one another's intentions. Aspergians, we don't know people's intentions. We cannot pick up people's intentions. We take you at what you say. And guess what? Because of that, you can take us at what we say. Our intentions are what we say, and we think that your intentions are what you say as well. So we cannot pick up intentions. And then picking up intentions, that's largely how neurotypicals are picking up nonverbal communication, such as a slight change in a person's tone of voice, certain facial expressions, subtle body language, sarcasm, etc. I had to learn and memorize facial expressions, and I still can't read a whole plethora of them. But I thought that there was only like 3 or 4 emotions. I thought there was happy, sad, mad, scared. And still, I forget that there's other emotions other than those still. That doesn't compute in my world. All right, so Aspergians also appear to produce lower levels of oxytocin. And now, if you don't know what that is, oxytocin is nicknamed as the bonding hormone. I often wonder if my lower production of oxytocin is why I had so much trouble breastfeeding my children. All 4 of my children, they did receive my breast milk, but most of it was not from directly off the tap. It was from pumping into bottles. And that would be because I believe, due to my lower production of oxytocin, I had a hard time getting the letdown reflex. That's when the milk really starts flowing. And so by the time I would get the letdown reflex, my baby would be exhausted just getting just little bits of the skim milk and none of the creamy stuff. And now the baby's like, I'm hungry and I am too dang tired to eat. So I would then use an electric pump and pump into bottles. But I also noticed it took me about an average of 3 times longer to pump out into the bottles the amount, like 4 ounces. That other women would take, like maybe 15 minutes per side. It could take me sometimes up to 45 minutes per side to get the same amount. And I noticed the reason being would be I could be pumping for 20 to 30 minutes before the letdown reflex finally happens, which I believe is triggered by oxytocin. Now, while they call oxytocin the bonding hormone, that doesn't mean that Aspergian mothers do not bond with their children. I bonded with my children and babies instantly. In fact, I bonded with them when they were still in utero, and I enjoyed reading to them, talking to them in utero. I saved them from my singing. I am not tone deaf, but I have a bad voice. So I didn't want to subject them to that. So while oxytocin is called the bonding hormone, that does not mean that Aspergians cannot bond. Familial bonds, especially if it's your own children, that is a natural bond, and I think it's a form of a genetic bond that goes beyond an oxytocin production. However, lower levels of oxytocin could explain why Aspergians have trouble or completely cannot connect with other people. Outside of family members, the only person I've so far ever been able to connect with is my husband. I did have a very close friend before him that I did connect with somewhat, but yeah, and my husband, way more higher level. I've never connected with anybody as much as I have with him. So there was that one friend who I miss dearly, haven't seen in years, and then there's my husband. I really don't have connections with anyone else. I do have friends, I have good friends, and we connect on some levels, but there's still, if I'm with that friend, like one of my friends I've had for years, and we go to a social event and we say get into the elevator, she will insta-connect with a complete stranger in the elevator, and they will be talking and be all comfortable, and they're already more connected than she and I are. Because incompatible, don't connect. my plug jack doesn't fit their plug or whatever. All right, and maybe that is because of the lower production of oxytocin. Now, also many Aspergians have sleep issues, and I am one of them. We may have trouble falling asleep, and once we're asleep, we may have trouble staying asleep. And that is theorized to be due to lower production of melatonin. And if you're not producing a proper amount of melatonin, you can have trouble falling asleep, and melatonin also helps us stay asleep. So without a proper production of melatonin, you're probably waking up several times a night. Last night was very hard sleep for me. I did not take melatonin. I wanted to try to produce my own. It was a completely overcast day, and I'll get into that in a minute, but overcast days drain me. And it also messes up my melatonin production, I've noticed. And I had trouble falling asleep. But then once I was asleep, for several hours, I was stuck in a cycle of early sleep, start dreaming, wake up, change position. Early sleep, start dreaming, wake up, change position. Over and over and over. And I finally got into deep sleep at around 6:30 in the morning. And then I didn't get to get much of that because it was time to get up not too long afterwards. So I am probably going to take melatonin tonight. So yeah, if you find that you have sleep issues, try melatonin, and different brands of melatonin are different grades and different qualities, and you might find different ones help. I actually have settled on melatonin gummies. I take 2 when I need to take them. They taste really good. And I'm not gagging on a pill. I have trouble swallowing pills because I feel them all the way down. And so I'm not gagging on a pill, and I'm not having to suffer swallowing a bitter tasting drink. I get to chew a strawberry flavored gummy. And 2 of those every once in a while, and that fixes me right up. I don't want to be dependent on taking melatonin supplementation. I have been always trying to create a circadian rhythm in sleeping and have been entirely unsuccessful. But I'm still trying. But I will do things to try to get my mind to produce its own melatonin for sleep, and often that will work, but I may still wake up 2 or 3 times a night. But if I can get myself to fall asleep, and if I only wake up 2 or 3 times a night, I can function off of that just fine. I'll take that. But when it's worse than that, then after a few days of that, then I will take some melatonin supplementation so I can get some good rest the next night. Now, here is something super interesting. Studies have shown that Aspergians have lower activity in their nucleus accumbens. Now, this area in the brain is known as the social rewards area. Social rewards. You know, one of the first things that comes to mind is actually gold star stickers at school. I have very few memories of kindergarten. I have some of preschool, and then I have some of first grade and up, but kindergarten I have very few. I think it's because I perceived kindergarten as almost identical to preschool. It was not much of a step up, and I was disappointed. But I do remember one thing in kindergarten was there was a chart on the wall, and everybody's names were there, and there was gold stars by some people's names. I was the only one who had no gold stars. I had no idea how to get gold stars, and I had no understanding why the kids were so dang happy for a sticky piece of paper that was in a star shape and colored gold. But boy, they were just, showing off their gold stars to anybody and everybody, and they seemed so proud of it, and they were showing, comparing with everybody else. And I'm sitting there with not one gold star, had no idea how to get a gold star, didn't care if I had any. I didn't see how having a sticky piece of paper next to my name was going to make any difference to my life whatsoever. So even if I knew how to earn the gold star, I wouldn't do it for the gold star. That was no reward. And I did once get a gold star, and I remember being very confused because I had no idea how I earned it. And then I remember finding it very interesting that later on that same day, the teacher went off and peeled the gold star off and gave me this weird, funny look on her face, which I think now maybe was sternness. I didn't know what that look meant. And I just continued doing my thing. I just thought she was a little cuckoo. So maybe that's a form of social reward, and if so, I certainly did not understand that at all. But also, social rewards is going to be some type of form of social, oh my gosh, how do you say that? Reciprocating, reciprocity. Where I find especially with ENFJ personality types and also the ESFJ personality types, because their top function is extroverted feeling, that they crave and seem to live off of social reciprocity. And, well, first of all, INTJ, such as myself, and NT temperaments, especially for introverted, we don't reciprocate very much anyways. But if you add the Aspergian traits or factor into that, there's no social reciprocating back. For one, we don't know that you're putting something out to us. And even if we did, we don't know how to put something back to you. So that, again, is going to tie in with the bonding hormone. We're low on oxytocin. That's going to tie in on, we don't necessarily have the whole mirror neuron thing going on as much as the neurotypicals do. And we don't get social rewards. I was reading a study where they took a group of high-functioning autistic kids, and they gave them some jobs to do, and then they rewarded some with social rewards. Yay, I'm so proud of you, here's a gold star, or whatever that entails, and they rewarded others with monetary rewards. The one with the monetary rewards actually felt rewarded for a job well done. The ones that got the social rewards felt like they didn't get any reward whatsoever. They just did the job, no payoff, no reward. And so, yes, well, I understand social rewards to the aspect of telling my children, I am proud of you, good job. That falls under encouraging. And while as a Christian and I have the Holy Spirit living inside of me, guiding me, I can encourage others. Do understand, I will only encourage someone if I think it will actually be helpful or if they need it. It is used as something to actually help them. I will never give empty compliments or empty encouragements. I will never say to a person, nice shoes, if I actually don't think their shoes are nice. But I'm proud of you and good job for me is like, okay, yippee. It would mean more if you told me, okay, tell me exactly why you're proud of me, exactly how I did that good job. Give me some details. That would be helpful. All right, so so the nucleus accumbens is an area of the brain that's known as a social rewards area. That area of the brain has been shown to have different or lack of activity in the autistic brain. Aspergians are not driven by social rewards. In fact, we're very ignorant to the very existence. I remember also as a kid in public school, I would see the neurotypical children bonding with the school teachers. They'd act all giddy and all happy when the teachers would speak to them in certain ways. I didn't participate in that. I didn't understand it. I still don't understand it. I just see it, and I think it is really, really strange. And again, there you go, nucleus accumbens, social rewards, totally foreign. I don't get it. I don't see how that could be a great yippee thing at all. So yeah, I didn't get it then. I still don't get it. Now, here's where there may be something that can help Aspergians, at least to an extent, at least a little bit with socialization. All right, and that would be serotonin release. Now, here's the thing. It has already been conjectured that possibly Aspergians have less serotonin release, or it's received differently in the brain, processed differently, whatever. And so some doctors will prescribe antidepressants to Aspergians. That usually gives no difference because these certain antidepressants, they release serotonin too slowly. The trick is to have serotonin release in the nucleus accumbens, for that to react in the nucleus accumbens. And apparently you need a faster serotonin release for that to happen, so antidepressants are out. And frankly, I think taking a pill to increase serotonin, I really am iffy on that. I personally am not considering it, nor have I considered it. I would be more interested in natural ways of increasing serotonin uptake in the nucleus accumbens. And guess what? There have been some studies that found that there is light therapy that naturally increases uptake of serotonin in the nucleus accumbens. And you know what light's the best light for the light therapy? It is sunshine. This is something that's going to overlap with some people who are not on the spectrum. Seasonal depression, for example. I don't get depressed. I choose not to get depressed. This may offend some people with the way I said that, but there's a whole science behind that, and that's for a different video. And a lot of that had to do with the near-death experience that I had many, many years ago. But I have less energy and less motivated, more fatigued and blah when it's winter or when it's totally overcast for days and days. But then you get a sunny day, my energy is through the roof. I'm more willing to go out and do social things, and I'm just zipping to and fro, and it's just the difference is amazing. So that's what I learned actually about the nucleus accumbens and Asperger's, was I was actually studying what effect does sunlight have that a lot of people have this seasonal depression or the seasonal downtime, or that when there's a really cloudy day they're like, and it's because lack of sunlight means lack of serotonin uptake in the nucleus accumbens, and that's going to affect some people. And since upping serotonin in the nucleus accumbens actually has been found to help Aspergians be more social, then there must be some type of connection there. But anyways, yeah, I am currently experimenting with light therapy in the nucleus accumbens on what light spectrums are good to take, how to bathe in certain lights when you have no sunlight outside. And right now I'm just studying it on myself with different light spectrums, different wavelengths, to find out, does this affect my energy? Can I use light therapy to get me to the same energy level that I'm at on a sunny day? And if that proves successful after I've studied that for a while, then I will use it to test it socially. I will attempt a light therapy before a social event, and I will take note on if my socializing seemed to be improved, or if I at least had a threshold to be able to socialize longer. I do know on sunny days, if I have access to that sun, like we're outside or there's a lot of windows, I do know, and I have noticed that I'm a bit more upbeat in my socializing, and I can handle it longer before I need to get away. But anyways, I thought this was, just some interesting things to discuss in an Aspergian video. If you are curious to learn more about Asperger's, especially Asperger's in girls and women, take a look at my Asperger's playlist, where I get into more of the traits of Asperger's and what to look for, and I get into more personally what it's like for me to live with Asperger's. Have a blessed day.